see here. Okay, one moment. I'm going to check a couple microphone controls we have. Okay, Chair, try again.
Okay, welcome. There we go. Welcome. My name is, welcome to the Monday, May 20th, 2024 meeting of the Wayzata Planning Commission. I hereby call the meeting to order. My name is Larissa Stockton, and I'm the chair of the commission. I have just a few words about how to participate in this evening's meeting. The hybrid meeting information for this evening is ID 867-5996-7315, and the passcode is 755462. There we go. Members of the public may attend the meeting in person, watch and listen remotely by viewing on meeting channel 8WCTV and the city's website at wayzata.org/WCTV. Public comment during the public forum and/or public hearing portions of the meeting may be provided in person at the meeting in advance or by logging into the Zoom call and raising your hand during the public hearing. When your name is called in the meeting, you'll be seen and heard in our council chambers and the cable channel. You'll be asked to unmute, and then you may begin your comment. All public comments must include your full name and your address. The city encourages comments or questions about the items on the agenda and, when possible, encourages comments or questions to be submitted in advance by emailing publiccomment@wayzata.org, calling the city staff at 952-404-5323, or mailing Wayzata City Hall at 600 Rice Street East, Wayzata, Minnesota 55391. Attention, public comment. Okay, thank you. Next, we can do roll call.
Yes, Chair. I'll start with Commissioner Planton. Here. Commissioner Sorensen.
Here.
Chair Stockton.
Here.
Commissioner Schwalbe.
Here.
And Chair, please note that Commissioners Elg and Severson are absent this evening.
Okay, thank you, noted. All right, next we have the approval of this meeting's agenda. Does anybody have any questions or proposed changes to this meeting, this evening's agenda? If not, may I have a motion to approve the agenda as presented?
Go ahead. So moved.
Thank you, Commissioner Schwalbe. May I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Commissioner Planton. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The motion passes, and the agenda for this evening is approved. Next, we have the consent agenda. This evening's consent agenda consists of two items. The first is A, approval of the meeting minutes from May 6th, 2024, and B, approval of the Planning Commission report and recommendation for approval for setback variance at 425 Highcroft Road. Does any commissioner have any questions or comments on the consent agenda or wish to poll for a discussion? Great. May I have a motion to approve as presented, the consent agenda as presented?
So moved.
Thank you, Commissioner Planton. May I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Commissioner Sorensen. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The motion passes, and the consent agenda is approved. Right. Next, we'd like to move on to the public hearing items. This evening, we have one item. The item is to consider the development application for subdivision request and variance to cul-de-sac length Ferndale Bluff at 565 Ferndale Road West. Community Director Gellner, do we have a presentation to be walked through?
Yes, we do. One moment here, Chair. Just one moment while it loads. Okay, Chair, so we are going to have multiple presenters this evening of the application. I will turn it over first to Assistant Planner Valerie Quarles, and then we'll also have our consulting planner Eric Swaber provide some of the presentation, and I'll complete the final slides. We also have our City Engineer and Public Works Director Mike Kelly available for the question and answer period of the evening. So thank you, Planner Quarles.
Thank you. Tonight we're going to be talking about the project called Ferndale Bluff, which is a preliminary plat and a subdivision variance. The project is located at 565 Ferndale Road West, and the owner and applicant are Dre Trustee LLC on behalf of Draycott DST, also known as the Capon Sisters, and their team. The project is located on the west side of town, off of Ferndale Road West, and is just located, we'll get into this quite a bit more, but is located just off of PV Pond, which is a pond just off of Lake Minnetonka. The parcel is zoned R1A, as are most of the parcels around it, with the exception of a strip of properties to the south right along the lake, and then guided estate single-family. It should be noted that the lot is also within the Shoreland Overlay District due to its proximity to Lake Minnetonka and to PV Pond. For some neighborhood context, the parcel itself is outlined in red in the middle. Lake Minnetonka sits to the south. There's a neighborhood of R1A single-family residences surrounding, both off of Bovey Road and Ferndale Woods, as well as Hillside Drive. And then again, you can see PV Pond just to the east there. For some street view context, that larger image is if you're standing on Ferndale Road West and looking north. Most of what you see is just that sort of wooded driveway entrance. And then if you were to step into the property a little bit and stand on the driveway, you'd get that image in the left corner there. Existing conditions, there's a lot going on with this property, which we'll go into in detail. In orange, in the middle there, you can see that there's an existing house. There's also 2 detached structures. There's a garage that loop of the driveway connects to, as well as a caretaker's cottage / guest house, which that area in yellow connects to. That area in yellow is a gravel driveway that curves up from the asphalt driveway and actually comes all the way down around the property. That's navigating quite a bit of topography there. And then the existing asphalt driveway comes off of Ferndale Road and heads up north to the house, which sits in the middle of the property. PV Pond is outlined in blue. And then those green areas that kind of surround the corners of the property are all wetland. The rest in white is the dry land of the property, is that hilly wooded area. And then there's a table provided just for your reference to understand how much of the site is dry land. It's about 3/4, and then the rest is totally unbuildable in terms of being PV Pond and Ferndale Marsh. In terms of existing conditions when it comes to slopes and bluffs, if you were to stand on this property and go to the house itself today, you would be looking down on quite a lot. There's a lot of slope as we head down to PV Pond, which sits at the lowest point. It's important to note that steep slopes, bluffs, they all have buildability restrictions, either through the subdivision ordinance or the shoreland ordinance, and those come with as well additional buffers and setbacks. So there's been a lot of work put into this application in terms of what defining those areas is and how that affects the final buildable areas of each potential lot. And each of those elements has a strict definition within our code that's been analyzed through this application. Trees are a big focal point of the property. You can tell that it's obviously incredibly wooded. In total, there are about 707 total significant trees surveyed. Quite a few of those are ash trees, about 70 ash trees. Ash trees, for the purposes of our tree preservation ordinance, essentially do not count because we put them under our dead, diseased, or dying category due to the presence of emerald ash borer in the community. In total, 634 total significant trees are included across the entire property, as well as 24 heritage trees, for a total of about almost 10,000 inches of tree, which is measured that diameter. So you can see that on the exhibit there, you can see there's obviously been some clearing around where the driveway is and where the existing house is, as well as an area towards the top of that first image by the guest house / caretaker's cottage that's pretty open and cleared, and that'll factor in later. There has been quite a bit of prior review with this project. We originally received an application in 2022 for this. Through that initial evaluation, the city triggered what's called a discretionary EAW. An EAW is an environmental assessment worksheet. And what that document does is allows cities as well as other regulators and the public to evaluate essentially whether the city's processes and other regulators can do an adequate job of regulating any sort of environmental impacts forecasted with a proposed development. So we went through that process. That was highly extensive. The EAW is included in the staff report, and what the EAW ended up finding was that the city's review processes, Minnehaha Creek Watershed District, Other regulators that are involved in future permitting essentially can adequately account for any environmental impacts associated with the project. The way that that EAW functions now is it gives us a good idea is if this project were to be approved, we would have a great list of the permits that are needed and all of the coordination that's needed. We know that through staff's own expertise, but it's also really nice to have that as a separate document that's really accessible to the public. The EAW was approved through a city council meeting in 2023, about a little over a year ago. A lot of the audience that's here tonight was here for that. So there has been a prior opportunity for public comment on a similar version of this proposal that was up in 2023, but that wasn't necessarily an approval or denial of this proposal. It was an evaluation of the environmental assessment worksheet. Some of the follow-ups that came out of that worksheet were an assessment for bald eagle habitat and how to handle that. Cultural resources assessments, essentially looking for any artifacts on the site due to its location near Lake Minnetonka as a hill. The result of that was that there weren't any artifacts found, as well as the wetland delineation that tells us exactly where the wetland is and how to treat it and its buffers as a part of the overall site planning. And with that, I'll pass it off to Planner's Waiver.
Thank you, Planner Quarles, and thank you, Chair and Planning Commission, for having me here tonight. So to discuss the development application and the actual requests, they are looking to divide this existing lot into 4 riparian lots that have private access to PV Pond. Those are all shown with the red outline. They're also proposing to create the new public cul-de-sac to serve those homes, which is the area in gray. And then there is actually a outlot, which is kind of shown in yellow to the west of the cul-de-sac. To approve these, there are 2 requests. First, a preliminary plat for the 4 R1A lots, and then second, a subdivision variance for a 726-foot cul-de-sac. The code limit is shown there at 600 feet, so it's 126 feet longer than what the code would allow. Looking at the lots themselves, we've kind of overlaid some of the previous information that Planner Quarles had gone over. Kind of the same color system of the area in blue is PV Pond. The area in green is Ferndale Marsh. So the requirements for the preliminary plat or these lots that are zoned R1A is they must have 200 feet of lot frontage or lot width. And then they must also have 80,000 square feet. Now, when we discuss the 80,000 square feet, it's area as shown by ownership. It's not whether it's lake, wetland, or dry land, but just to show how that worked out. You'll see Lot 1 has the least amount of lake at about 6,100 square feet, and then it grows through Lot 2 and Lot 3. Lot 4 has over 15,000 square foot of lake, and then wetlands, almost the opposite of, there's almost 95,000 square feet of wetland on Lot 1, and then lots 2 and 3, it's 4,800 or 5,700, and then there's relatively a small amount of wetland on Lot 4, which is about 1,650. So when you look at these lots, for the dry area, Lot 1 has 114,000 square feet, and then when you look at the other 3, it drops from 67,800 to about 65,000, and then 63,350 for Lot 4. So we're looking here at their concepts of houses with driveways to determine what could be the lot coverage and the impervious surface. We need these to be able to evaluate, how this would meet the requirements of the city code. But we would point out that the individual owners of the lots, should this get approved, would come in with their own home design and their own driveway design. But we needed a demonstration of how these 4 lots could be constructed. And then you see in those cases, Lot 1 being the largest is about 2.3% lot coverage, and then the other three work out to be 6.2% lot coverage. And then so lot coverage is the buildings themselves. Impervious surface would be the buildings plus the driveways, any other impervious surface. So we're looking at 3.5% for the proposed impervious surface lot 1, and then you see that lots 2 through 4 go from 9% to 9.8%. So within the standards of the R1A district. One of the other factors that we'd want to point out is the subdivision standard has standards for what are the side lot lines. And a couple of the standards are that they would be at right angles to the street lines, so at right angles from the cul-de-sac, and that they are also radial to the lakeshore. So the area in blue, that those lot lines are radial to that lakeshore itself. So when we look at the various lot lines, looking at the lot between 1 and 2, there's actually 5 different segments within that lot line. So the lot line to the farthest west is radial or at right angle to the street line, and the line to the farthest east is radial to the lakeshore. But then we have 3 other lot line segments that do not meet those requirements. For the area between lots 2 and 3, it's the same with the exception of there is one more segment. So again, the farthest west lot line is at a right angle to the street. The farthest east is radial to the lakeshore. But then we have 4 other segments that are neither of those measurements. And then the difference between lots 3 and 4, that boundary, there are 3 segments. Again, one that is at right angle to the street, one that is radial to the lakeshore, and then the third one, which is neither condition. So regarding the preliminary plat, there is shoreland district setback standards, and there's actually 3 different standards, and it's the greater of those 3. So the homes need to meet either 75 feet from the lake. B is a line drawn between the 2 closest riparian structures on either side. And then third is average setback from the 2 closest riparian principles on either side. So to start with, after they demolish the existing house, there would be no homes on this subdivision. So essentially the first home would be constructed 75 foot from the lakeshore. Then that home and every subsequent home would kick in either B or C. So once the first home gets built, that becomes the closest riparian structure, or if you have one on each side, we look at the average. So there was an exhibit that was provided by the applicant to show how the order of buildings could be constructed. There is an order that would allow for all the homes to be constructed and meet these setbacks. But some of the sequence of order would have significant impacts on the buildable area. So really constrain an owner if their 2 neighbors, put their homes in a location that might hinder their development. But again, they did provide the exhibit that shows that these 4 lots can be developed and meet these setback standards. Another area we need to focus on is bluffs and steep slopes. Looking at bluffs, essentially the bluffs are unbuildable. They shouldn't be grading in that area, disturbance in that area, but you will see those are shown by the areas in orange. Essentially, at lot 2, there's an area heading north, actually towards Ferndale Marsh. On essentially the property line between lot 2 and lot 3, there's another bluff that heads east towards PV Pond, and then a larger area between lots 3 and 4 that head towards PV Pond. The area shown in purple is the bluff impact zone, and that's where no grading could occur within that bluff impact zone. In addition to that, there's another 10 feet that would be the structural setback. So the buildings would need to be outside of all those areas and 10 foot further. I think we discussed, how the building pads line up with those 3 bluff areas. A couple other things to observe is areas that are not bluff but are steep slope. So on the right-hand side, the areas in yellow and the areas in the areas in yellow and the areas in kind of that maroon color or red color are all slopes that are greater than 18%. So those would be steep slopes. You would see there's areas of that on, all 4 lots. When we look at the proposed building pads, one of the requirements in the code is that the applicant must demonstrate that the lots will not require construction on slope of over 18%. For lot 1, their building pad and driveway would not require construction within the 18% slope. On all 3 of the remaining lots, lot 2, 3, and 4, the driveway would be required to be greater than 18% slope. So there's an 18% slope between the proposed building pad and the cul-de-sac. So those driveways would disturb that. The way the slopes are on lot 4, the building pad would also disturb that over 18%. So big difference between bluff, which is pretty much no allowed construction, grading, anything, where steep slope, this is a consideration for the protected areas that the applicant should demonstrate that they can do their construction without the requirement of grading within that 18% slope. For the preliminary plat, Val had talked earlier about the almost 10,000 caliper inches of trees that are on the site. Here, they're proposing to remove 85 significant trees and 3 heritage trees for a total of 1,196 total inches. The code does allow for 10% removal without replacement. So that would be, so the remaining is 75 inches of mitigation proposal and then 229 inches of fee in lieu of replacement due to the forest density. So now we get into the subdivision variance. So again, they are proposing a 726-foot-long cul-de-sac when the city code has a limitation of 600 feet limit. We are showing here in red, that red line would be where the 600-foot would end. The area in blue is at 726 feet in length. The applicant has stated that they're proposing that because that would limit the amount of grading and tree removal compared to the 600-foot option. But that also comes into play of having that length to be able to have that 200-foot frontage as well. There is another consideration in that there is an area that's about 62 to 65 feet in length that touches the property to the west. Whenever we look at a subdivision, we try to look at neighboring properties and whether those could be divided and how a road system could be expanded upon. The property to the west is large enough to be split into a second lot. So they are proposing that frontage along the west side that could be a street heading towards the west. But there is a requirement in the subdivision ordinance that all curb cuts be at least 40 feet from a intersection should the property to the west develop and an intersection be created to extend that road. The proposed driveway for lot 2 would be within 40 feet of what potentially could be an intersection at the location. And then there's a number of standards for grade and other factors for a public street. So the variance is for the length itself, but we are showing that this driveway is, so the dark line kind of in the middle or below, the more jagged line is the proposed road. That does meet the 8%. The, there's quite a bit of cut and fill that would be needed to make those grades work and be compliant with the city code. As I stated earlier, the applicant is proposing this because it limits the amount of grading and therefore limits the amount of tree removal with this longer cul-de-sac. A little bit bigger description into that grading and the retaining walls. We do show that outlot A there in yellow, just beside the road. There are three retaining wall sections that are being proposed to be able to meet that 8%. So I'm just going to go back real quick if I can. You can see to the right, you see there's kind of a peak that is above where the proposed road is. And then if you look to the left, there's actually the existing ground is below the proposed road. So that corresponds with the two red lines kind of on the bottom. That is where the surrounding land would actually be higher than the road. And then that retaining wall that's at the top is to actually raise the road above the surrounding grade itself. In addition to the road itself, there will be future grading for homes, accessory buildings, potentially walkways and stairs that would require more grading and require likely more tree removal. So those are all to be taken into consideration. The grading that is shown here on this exhibit is the road itself, some of the driveway construction, and the stormwater infrastructure. To discuss the outlot itself, the applicant has chosen to propose a combination through title work of Lot 4 would be combined with Outlot A, and so that would be connected through that title work. It would not be additional right-of-way. The right-of-way is proposed to be 50 feet in width as required by the city code. There are the retaining walls both in the Outlot A and the proposed city right-of-way. So finally, the other department comments. City engineer has reviewed this, doesn't have any additional comments regarding the preliminary plat. I would just like to point out that is the request tonight, is the preliminary plat. There still would be the final plat, which does not come to the planning commission. That goes to the city council. And then a development agreement that would be approved by the city council should the other two be approved. So the city engineer will have two additional chances to finalize any plans, but regarding the EAW and the preliminary plat standards, the city engineer does not have any additional comments. With that, I'll turn it to Community Development Director Geldner.
Thank you, Planner Swaber. So the public hearing notice was published in the Sun Sailor on May 9th, and neighbors received a mailing about the public hearing if they lived within 500 feet of the property. We've received 5 public comments as of 5 p.m. today. All were opposed to the project. They cited environmental impacts and a high number of lots, impacts to PV Pond, large road, tree impacts, the land disturbance, and construction traffic. I want to highlight the applicable code provisions for your review this evening and note which pages those are on. I think those will be helpful as we move into the discussion portion of the evening, but it's also helpful to have handy as you're reviewing and asking questions. For our preliminary plat criteria for approval, we are looking at page 30, it starts on page 36 of 283 in the agenda packet. And then for the subdivision variance, which is that length of the subdivision, that is going to be on page 37. And then we also have reference there on those following pages that are specific ordinances that pertain to the project. A lot of those are shoreland related provisions and then some other zoning provisions. We have formatted those criteria into the form of questions in case that's just helpful as you're reviewing. So I won't read these word for word, but essentially they are about a consistency with the comp plan in the creation of the lots not having an adverse impact on the scale and pattern of character of the city. Does the site layout respond to and is reflective of the surrounding lots and the neighborhood character? Does the proposed lot layout and the building pads, do they conform to all of the performance standards? And then do they affect values in the area? And then in terms of there being 4 lots proposed here on this preliminary plat, do the building pads that result from the subdivision, do they preserve sensitive areas? And are those building pads the result from a subdivision that respects the natural topography and minimizes filling and grading? And then another question is, are the existing stands of significant trees retained where possible and building pads sensitively integrated? Does the design of the subdivision clearly reflect all of the necessary measures of protection so we can ensure adverse environmental impact? We can ensure that is mitigated. And also, are you seeing that the proposed design will not require construction on slopes over 18% or result in other significant alterations of the natural drainage system that have adverse impacts that cannot be contained within the plat? And are the proposed lots suitable in their natural state for the proposed use with minimal alteration? I have a few more questions here that are associated with the 4 riparian lots. So that, again, there's 4 lots, all 4 riparian. That's another word for water access, lakeshore lots. Do the demonstrated building pads that we're seeing in the plat, do they preserve sensitive areas? And are the proposed lots suitable in their natural state? Now, for the subdivision variance, that is specific criteria that is different from the preliminary plat. Again, this is about the cul-de-sac length. And the first question here is, are you seeing special circumstances or highly unique conditions that are affecting the property? And would these circumstances mean that there needs to be strict application of the ordinance? And that if that strict application of the ordinance was taken, would that deprive the applicant of a reasonable use of their land? The second question with the subdivision variance is, would the granting of the variance be detrimental to the health, safety, and welfare of the property, other properties in the area? Would the variance correct inequities resulting from an extreme physical hardship, such as topography? Is the identified hardship related to economic difficulties, and is the hardship a result of an action or actions by the owner, or the applicant, or developer? So a lot of questions there to work through. Our next steps for tonight are to have staff answer any clarifying questions that you have right away. And then we'll move into the applicant's presentation, and you can ask questions of the applicant after that. And then any other additional questions for staff. Then we'll move into the public hearing, and then we will move into discussion and decision. So Chair, with that, I do have a recommended motion for later on in the evening. At this point, we can take any questions you have.
All right, thank you very much, Director Gellner and Planners Weber. Commissioners, do we have any questions of staff at this point?
I have one. Oh, go ahead, Ken.
No, go ahead.
Okay.
Commissioner Wong.
I'm curious about the 726-foot cul-de-sac, because the 600 feet is what is proposed, or what should be. 726 is what is proposed. So why did the city in the first place pick 600 feet? Is there a reason why 600 feet is better than longer on a cul-de-sac?
It's a good question. So right off the bat, Mike Kelly, you got the first question. So I'll turn over to our Director of Public Works and City Engineer, Mike Kelly.
Thank you, Emily. Madam Chair, board members. Our code was put together before any of us were here. I'm not sure exactly how they came across the 600 feet for a standard length cul-de-sac. There are cul-de-sacs around not only Wayzata, but the adjoining communities that are longer than that. I'm not sure how that was arrived to in the 90s, I think was the last version of our code.
So there's no safety concern or anything like that that would have come up regarding having 726 feet instead of 600? It was just a figure that was chosen back then.
Exactly. I'm not sure how they came to that number, what it was based on.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I would maybe just add a little bit. We
Please.
don't tend to theorize about what the intention was of the code writers back in the day, but I would just, an observation is that a lot of our city blocks are around the 600 feet. So I imagine that there was potentially an analysis then of if we're making any kind of grid or trying to develop multiple lots in multiple places, perhaps 600 was chosen for that purpose.
Thank you. Commissioner Sorensen.
So the road and cul-de-sac are public right-of-ways, public roads, is that correct?
Yes.
And so who pays for the construction of the roads?
Well, the exact answer to that would be clarified during our development agreement process, but what has been typical is that the developer has covered the cost of construction.
Okay. And I think there was maybe some information about, in the construction of the roads, is there an excess of material to be hauled off the site? If so, do we know how much that is? It might be an applicant question.
I think that would be a good applicant question. I don't recall that in our application materials, but that is often something that applicants are starting to plan for early on in the process.
Thank you.
I have a question. Planners Weber, you had a slide up, and in it you discussed the order of building each home with regards to impacts. I'd like another pass at understanding that a bit better.
One second while that gets pulled up.
Thank you.
Okay, so we have Lot 1, you see, is proposed to be on the western side of the plat, kind of straight north of the cul-de-sac. A lot of the reason there is because of that kind of lobe of Ferndale Marsh and then some actual steep slope around that lobe. So that one's the farthest west. And then you see lots 2, 3, and 4 are generally in the same location. They're, they're 50 to 100 feet off of the cul-de-sac, depending on the location. And then there's a dashed line showing the building pad. So again, the first lot basically follows a 75-foot. There'll be other factors such as the bluff and other things that we showed, but they would build the first house. If I wanted to use an example, I don't think I have the technology to do it, but Lot 1 is in the northwest corner of the site. And then if we had Lot 4 built next, the line between Lot 1 and the house on Lot 1 and the house on Lot 4, that line would basically go through the proposed house pads for lots 2 and 3. So that would be the line drawn between the two closest riparian structures on either side. So if lots 2 or lot 3 were built first, then it's easier for those to get built. But I think the clearest example would be if lots 1 and lot 4 built first, that's going to have an impact, definitely have an impact on the buildable area for lot 2 and 3, but may even have an impact on the building pads themselves.
So there's an interreliance on the success of the houses because of order of building, which is not a controllable or foreseeable event? Is that what I'm concluding?
I guess I'd respond to it in this way. The applicant is not proposing any restrictions on the orders in which the homes are being built.
But the order could impact the other homes in a detrimental way?
Correct. That is correct.
And the detriment would be to the setback?
Well, the detriment would be to the building pad, the amount of buildable area, which may have an impact on, the size or design of those homes that may or may not make them similar to the neighboring homes.
I'm going to ponder that for a minute, Commissioner Schwalbe.
Okay, so if 1 and 4 were built first, is it possible that lots 2 and 3 could ask for a variance? It's kind of a technical thing that you're
So-
talking about. Can they ask for a variance to build as is on here?
Anybody can ask for a variance if they own the property. The issue is, one of our subdivision standards is that the proposed subdivision doesn't require variances. So if we knew that a variance was required, a finding could be made that it violates that section of the code. Here, the owner or the applicant demonstrated that there is an order that they could be constructed and comply. But we are aware that there's also an order that to make similar sized building pads could require the request for a variance. Does that help?
I think so.
Okay, and if you want to see, the applicant has provided on pages 95 through 102, that kind of scenario, and how the different
Did you
orders.
say 102?
102 is the end, 95 is the beginning.
Okay.
Any additional questions on this topic?
I have one. The pad size or the house sizes, the possible ones we're looking at, approximately what size is that right now that we have diagrammed?
The rectangle,
The rectangle, yeah.
yep, that is 50 foot deep by 100 foot long.
Okay, thank you.
Maybe I make a comment? That's a pretty good-sized pad. I mean, all on one floor, that would be 5,000 square feet. Am I right? Am I doing the math here right? Okay. So you have a two-story building or a building with a walkout, that would be a very large, it could be up to a 10,000 square foot house, right? Is that what you're saying?
The only thing I would say is to consider that the garage likely would be in that pad as well.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, any other questions of staff at this time?
I have just one more.
Commissioner Schwalbe?
Okay, so PV Pond is considered an impaired lake by the state of Minnesota. Can you talk a little about what makes it an impaired lake and what the city thinks may be the result of having 4 more houses on that?
Yes, I think I will, Mike, if you're comfortable taking this question, I can just start off by saying that there are many impaired waters in the state of Minnesota due to pollutants from development over time, and that they do have a stormwater mitigation plan, but then I can turn it over to Director Kelly here.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Schwalbe, the PV pond is impaired for chlorides in particular, which is salts, usually from the roadway. I wouldn't see any adverse impact for additional homes on the impairment that already exists.
Okay.
In fact,
The
there may.
impairments would not come from more building, from 4 homes?
No.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for staff at this point? All right. Thank you. At this time, I'd like to call the applicant to step forward and address the commission. Please state your name and address for the record and your role if you're an advisor or other part of the applicant's team. Given the amount we need to cover, if you can keep as close to 10 minutes as possible, it'd be greatly appreciated. Thank you.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the Planning Commission, and staff. My name is Mike Stedman, and my address is 401 Lake Street East in Wayzata, Minnesota.
And my name is Samantha Capon Muldoon, and I'm at 1801 West Farm Road in Long Lake, Minnesota, 55356, and I'm the owner and developer.
I'm with Compass Real Estate, and I specialize in new construction and land development. I have for 30 years. I've developed and been involved in several projects in the Lake Minnetonka area, including Locust Hills and Shoreline Estates. I'm working with Meredith Howell of Coldwell Banker Realty. Meredith has a long history of selling upper bracket properties in the Lake Minnetonka community, concentrating in Wayzata and Orono and estate properties. Meredith has been involved in several high-end subdivisions as well, Brackett's Point and the Dayton property on Mooney Lake Preserve. Meredith has also lived on Ferndale for 30 years and has served on several boards in the city of Wayzata. I would like to take a moment to introduce our development team. Brad Scheib. He is a land use planner with HKGI and has 30 years' experience in municipal planning, serving as a staff planner and consulting planner, and a bluff delineation expert. Brad and his team have worked with the city staff for over 2 years to ensure we have an accurate application of the city's regulations to this site, and will be taking the technical lead this evening. Mark Gromberg of Gromberg and Associates is our engineer and surveyor. Mark has been working hand in hand with staff for 2 years as well. Pat Steinhoff is our real estate attorney and consultant with Melkerson, Gunn, and Martin. Finally, I would like to introduce Samantha and her sisters, as they are owners of the property, and they are also developing the property. Samantha is the representative for the family here tonight, and I would like to introduce her now to talk more about the history of the family.
Thank you. What I'm going to do is just take you through kind of an overview of the who, where, what, and why of the property. You guys have had a very extensive 250-page packet, so I'm not going to get into the technical details. So we'll start with the who, which begins with my parents, Joan and Gary Capon. They purchased the property in 1964, and they raised their family there. We all grew up in Wayzata. They spent 60 years in this community, and they have a long tenure of community involvement. And they've watched the neighborhood evolve over time, as they are, at this point, the longest residents in the neighborhood. They are currently retired at the age of 88, and my sisters and I own the property, and we are the ones proposing the development. A little bit about ourselves. I'm Samantha Capon Muldoon. I live in Orono with my husband and my 2 children. I have a strong conservation focus in my life. I am vice chair of the Long Lake Waters Group, which is a watershed and water quality wetlands group in Long Lake, Orono, and Medina. I'm the former conservation chair at the Lake Minnetonka Garden Club, where I've advocated for native plants and conservation on both a local and on a federal level. And I'm a former board chair of the Minnesota Zoo Foundation, where I spearheaded the plan focused on conservation. I'm very involved in my community. I'm a former PTO chair over at Orono. I'm a former board member of National Charity League Northwoods chapter. And some of you may remember me from the Pancake Breakfast in Wayzata, which I've led for the last 5 years. My sister, Heather Capon, is on Zoom watching the meeting. She's a former licensed landscape architect. She's worked with a variety of firms that are internationally acclaimed landscape architecture firms, all known for their ecologically responsible design and use of native plants. Past projects include sustainable designs for Stanford University, Martha's Vineyard Estates. She has a long history in that department. Currently, she's a large-scale landscape painter living in Northern California with her husband, who's also a landscape architect, and their 3 boys. My sister Allison is a licensed architect, and she's a nationally known environmental and sustainability consultant with over 20 years' experience. She was an early lead reviewer, and her credentials are long. She's also a national nationally known speaker on environmental conferences. And she lives in Seattle with her husband, Mark, and my niece, Camille. We also have a team of seasoned local experts, and I'm not going to read this line by line. It's too much, but I just want to point out the expertise and experience of the people on our team is very deep, and they all have local experience, and they know this area, and they know the code. And then I'm going to go from the who to the where. The arrow is pointing at our house on PV Pond, and this is a neighborhood that's evolved over time. And you can see the evolution is happening in this slide as homes are constructed and things are demolished and built in. Then we're going to go to the next slide that just shows the lot lines of the home. And again, the green arrow points to the roof line of our house. And you can see the cul-de-sac to the left of it that will come up later. So let's go to the what. What are we proposing? We are proposing a very small-scale subdivision. There are currently 2 houses on the property, and we are proposing to divide it into 4 lots on almost 12 acres of land. As Eric pointed out, or Mr. Zwiber pointed out, we are not building any of the houses or the driveways. They were put in the plat to demonstrate feasibility, but we do not intend to build them ourselves. That's up to the homeowners. They mentioned we are also seeking a variance. That came about when we were looking to site the road. We realized that if we sited the cul-de-sac down by the current caretaker cottage, that was an open space. And by taking advantage of that, we would then remove a lot less trees. And then after doing the numbers, we realized what an impact it had on the grading. And it just really takes, it's more responsive to the topography of the site. So we think it makes it a better project for environmental reasons. I'd also like to point out we've met multiple times with the neighbors, and we've tried to be very sensitive to their concerns. We altered the proposed road, we revised the tree preservation plan to save more trees, and we are very empathetic and understand their concerns. They are, in fact, the same concerns we have had over the past 60 years, as each of them has put in docks, taken down homes, built boathouses, and subdivided their properties and put in roads all around PV Pond. We have watched that happen, and we understand that construction and change is disruptive and inconvenient because we have had to experience it with all of their properties. I want to assure you that we will continue to strictly abide by all the rules and regulations and zoning and ordinances that the city puts in and the state. We will work diligently to minimize any disruption in the neighborhood that we can, and we will seek opportunities to address their concerns as we move forward. Just a little bit about the when. The project began in 2019 internally, but we've really been working with the city for the past 2 years, refining and making the project better. And during that time, there were updates and amendments to the different ordinances, including bluffs, shorelines, and trees, which we have responded to in our proposal. We've submitted additional information when asked. The spring 2003 environmental assessment workshop and the phase 1 cultural resources assessment. And then we, on our own, conducted a bald eagle assessment because we wanted to make sure we weren't disturbing bald eagles. We've also given the city some bluff constraint details and graphics to really, that's a complicated question and issue, and we have contributed those, as well as tree impact scenarios, and then multiple conforming shoreline setbacks scenarios, which you were asking about earlier. The why really is our guiding vision has been the stewardship of our property with a responsible, thoughtful, small-scale development. It's 4 lots on almost 12 acres. We are respecting all of the city codes and regulations, ordinance, and zoning. It is consistent with the existing scale and character of the neighborhood around PV Pond and Ferndale, and it is sensitive to the environment because it stays away from the wetlands, the shoreline setbacks, and the bluffs. We feel very strongly that it's a good project. And thank you for your time, and we're here to answer any questions.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Appreciate it. Commissioners, do we have any questions for the applicant at this time?
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, that's the same question I did earlier. Have there been calculations done on to build the infrastructure, roads primarily, of like net material haul off the site? Do we know how that looks?
Mark Gronberg can come up and answer it. One thing I will note is that we have an extremely deep two-story basement in the existing house, so that has not been factored into the grading, that we need to fill that, so.
Right, yeah, we did a calculation, Mark Gronberg, Gronberg and Associates, Engineers and Surveyors in
Thank
Long
you.
Lake. Yeah, we had done a analysis of the grading for the 600-foot cul-de-sac and the 725-foot cul-de-sac. It went down, when we increased the road, it went down to 3,900 cubic yards from 9,600 cubic yards. And that 3,900 didn't account for filling in the basements and that. So there will be some taken off-site, but I don't know, I would guess it might be in the neighborhood of 1,500, 2,000 cubic yards.
So if I understand, you're right, for the 600-foot cul-de-sac, it's 3,900 cubic yards?
For the 600, it's 9,600 cubic yards. For the 726-foot cul-de-sac, it's 3,900.
Okay.
It has to do with where that cul-de-sac, on the steep side slope, it requires a lot more grading. If you push it by the guest house where it's flatter, it saves a lot of trees than a big, wide cul-de-sac.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions? Yes,
question.
Mr. Schwalbe?
So I took a look at the property, of course, and I went in on the driveway, and then I continued on the gravel driveway. But the gravel driveway that goes behind the current house, that will just go back to nature, is that correct? That's not going to be used for anything?
It's not our intention to use it for anything.
Okay, so each lot will individually have access to the lake?
Correct,
Yes.
yes.
So how do you see that working? Because like Lot 1 is quite a long ways from the lake. How are they going to get there? Can you explain that?
I can try. It is dry land, and they can walk down to the dock and get to the lake. We are down there all the time. It's feasible.
Okay. And you walk down the road, though, that won't be there anymore?
We walk through the woods or down the, we walk through the woods or down the road. I mean, the road won't be an existing road, but there will still be no trees in that area.
So then the other lots will have a stairway down?
There is.
One on the bluff.
There is one stairway there now, and then I would assume Lot 4 probably won't need a stairway because it's fairly level to the lake. And then Lot 2 would need a stairway.
And do you anticipate each lot having its own dock, its own pier, its a couple of motorized?
We're not putting in docks, but we wanted to make the opportunity available to people that bought the homes. Each of the lots as delineated now has room for a dock, and they are compliant with all of the setbacks, unlike many of the other docks on the pond. Ours are compliant.
So the owners of these lots won't have to ask for permission to put in a dock then?
No. I mean, they'll have to ask the LMCD,
yeah.
but they don't have to ask us.
Okay. And just one more question?
Yes?
Did your family plant many of the trees on that 11 acres?
My mother has never met a tree she hasn't tried to keep, and she and my father have battled over keeping the trees over the years. So the trees are, I mean, I don't know if we planted definitely some of them on the top and some of them around the house, but in the woods, it's just natural, and my parents didn't believe in cutting down trees.
Because my observation of going there is that the forest, it is a forest, has a lot of trees and a lot of volunteer trees coming up around all of the bigger trees.
Absolutely.
And a lot of ferns and brush and tumbleweed and moss.
Yes.
So
I think
Getting more
volunteer
sun in
trees
there
is
is
the
gonna be a
appropriate
good-
way to talk about. I think volunteer trees is the appropriate way to talk about it. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, it's okay. I'm just saying that more sunlight down there on the ground is going to be a good thing because it almost has a moldy feel about it.
Yes,
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
thank you.
Any other questions for the applicant? Yes,
How did you determine 4 lots?
We originally were thinking, we actually hired a surveyor earlier who proposed 6 lots, and we felt uncomfortable with that. And then as we didn't realize the setback and bluff constraints when we were originally talking to the first surveyor. And when we hired Mark Gronberg, he just helped us refine it, and we wanted to be thoughtful. I mean, with 2 sisters who are architects, one's a landscape architect, they just had opinions.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question. What is the potential distance to the water from the plat at Lot 1?
I don't know if I have that at hand, but we can find out. From the, across the
From building
wetland?
pad? From the building pad?
Yeah, it just feels like, I'm just wondering how much has to be done to get to the water from the plat. It feels like,
So
Far.
if you'll notice on Lot 1, on that drawing, there, you can walk from that, where the potential building pad is, down across that little bit on the top, and then down to the area where you see there's sort of there's a little stream there, where the green wetlands kind of is an isthmus. And you can walk down there easily. It's dry land. And again, we don't know if the people on Lot 1 will put in a dock. They may decide it's too far, but we want to give them that choice if it's important to them.
so it's more like a nice to have.
I would say, I think for people who purchase the lots, I can't anticipate what their passion for watercraft is.
Okay.
Because we have 408 feet of shoreline, then you can put 4 properties on there, and that's, seemed to make sense.
Thank you. Yes,
Question.
Commissioner,
So on the slide we're looking at, I assume the green wetlands?
Yes. And the white is dry land.
So practically, for lots 1 and 2, to get to the water, say you had a dock, you're going over some wetlands, which may
Yes,
or may not
and-
require a boardwalk or that type thing?
No, it would be a dock, but the EAW found that the effects of putting a dock over the wetlands would be negligible and temporary, that it was not an environmental issue. So,
If I may, there are several boardwalks on PV Pond to get access to their docks.
Would you say that again, please?
There are boardwalks on PV Pond
Yeah.
as well, and the other residences that do have access to the pond.
It looked like, especially with the length of some of those
well, and there's what you
wetlands
can't.
areas, that might be necessary.
Yes, most of the docks on PV Pond are in excess of what, the length that they're allowed. And then some of the residents have long permanent staircases that are not, ours is just a stepping stone staircase, it's not.
Yeah, okay.
so it's all boardwalk material to get from one, to get to the water. I'm sorry, dock material.
Dock material,
Thank you.
exactly.
I
yeah.
misspoke, thanks.
I think of a boardwalk as bigger,
Yeah, dock material, okay.
dock material.
Got it, thank you. Any further questions of the applicant?
Chair, I just wanted to note you had one unanswered question still, was the distance between the
Oh, right,
building
yeah.
pad
That-
and down to the shore.
Where do I? So from the dry land on Lot 1 to the slip on the dock, it would be 130 feet. and it's 500 feet from the house. But remember, again, that house is just it's just a placeholder. We are not citing the homes.
Right, you're not doing the homes or the driveways.
Right.
No.
No.
Thank you. Any other questions of the applicant? And I actually have another question. Can you also elaborate on my question on the order of builds and the impact that the order of the building would potentially have?
Sure. We submitted to the city like a variety of different scenarios where the order of build would not negatively impact any of the properties when building. I'm going to turn it over to Brad because it's very technical.
Thank you.
He's technical.
Madam Chair, my name is Brad Scheib. I'm with HKGI, 800 Washington Avenue in Minneapolis, Washington Avenue North. Could I ask staff to pull up the actual PDF report that we sent you that showed the different scenarios that work, and maybe that will help kind of walk through this. It is a technical discussion, and so just stop me if I make you more confused. We have a situation where you have a definition in the code that by its nature creates power within each individual property owner to change the setback of their neighbors. It's not common, but it's not uncommon to have that kind of provision in a zoning code where you have, we often refer to it in my business as a line of sight, where it's really about trying to protect the view to and from a lake, but it's also pushing the homes back from the water body. So what we have done here is try to throw some different scenarios of these sequences work.
Okay.
And so there's multiple sequences that work. Some of them work without any question. Some of them work, but, well, it really depends on where exactly the house goes. The corner that might jut out a little further, and so it's really difficult to try to see that. This first scenario that you see on the screen here, the phasing sequence of lot 3 builds first, then lot 2 builds second, then lot 4 builds third, and lot 1 builds last. That sequence works without much of a problem. Can you flip to the next slide? Here's another scenario where lot 3 builds, and this one now you start to see some yellow show up. So lot 3 again builds first, that's the second lot up. Then lot 2 builds, and that's the third lot up. Lot 4, which is the first one, is really not impacted because they were impacted by lot 3 building first. And then lot 1 builds first, so that's another scenario where it works. So what we're doing is we're looking at the greatest impact of 75 feet, which once a house is built, that one's kind of out the door. The next impact of an average from the lake shore to the building itself of the 2 houses on either side of you. That's the blue curved line because we're measuring an average. And the green line representing a line drawn between the 2 houses on either side of you. And so we went through this iteration to try to show different scenarios that do work. We know there's a number of scenarios that do work. We know that there are a number of scenarios that create situations where, to your point, Commissioner Schwabing, right? To your point,
That's good.
you end up having to have a variance for it. And the variance is not necessarily created by the plat request. The variance is created by subsequent property owners when they plan to build the home. That's the challenge that we face with the ordinance provision. On the next slide, I think it shows another scenario that works. This one has 2 going first instead of 3, followed by lot 1, then 3, and then 4. And you can see the building pad that Eric mentioned gets impacted. But to the other point that you've raised, a 5,000 square foot building pad's pretty big. So it's impacted, it's still doable without a variance. And so there's a number of scenarios where that building pad is impacted. Is it still feasible? Probably. Can someone build as big of a house as they might want to? Maybe not.
Thank you.
I have an additional question. The pads are located in areas due to the grade, correct? They're
Yeah, I believe
topography? I mean,
the building pads were shown
the
in
best
an
possible scenario.
effort to minimize the impact on trees, particular heritage trees, and also put them in the flattest location to minimize the impact on grade. And so all of the building pads that were put there were put with those things in mind.
And just, the building pad for Lot 2 is sort of in an area that's where there's driveway now, a great part of it. The building pad for Lot 3 is in the backyard, which is a green lawn without trees on it. The building pad for Lot 1 is in woods, but it's not, it's flat, it's not a steep slope, so.
Thank you.
Okay, good questions. Are there any other questions for the applicant at this time? Okay, thank you very much for your presentation. We appreciate it. Now I'd like to turn to the public hearing. And before we begin, I'd like to make a few comments. The public hearing is a time for us to listen to you, our community, about the approval requests we are considering this evening, and it's a very important part of our official process that allows the public to participate. Any questions asked during the public hearing will be held until the end of the hearing and may be addressed by staff at that point. We welcome hearing new information. If there's a repeat of the same information, please refrain from doing so, although we would like to, in detail, we would like to hear that view. With that said, if you can kindly keep your comments to 2 minutes, I'll now open the public hearing for the application of the subdivision request and variance to cul-de-sac length Ferndale Bluff at 565 Ferndale Road West. Thank you. If you wish to speak, please come to the podium and raise your hand. If you'd kindly give your name and address. And if you're connected to the applicant in any way, please let us know, or representing anyone else. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Sue Schwalbach. I live at 510 Ferndale Road West. I'm on the channel that comes out of Peavy Pond on the west side of the channel. I think 2 minutes is pretty tough to cover some of the things that are here, but I'm going to make one comment first of all, which is a building pad is different than a building envelope. So when we look at what they portray on the plat, we cannot assume that somebody's going to build a rectangle house. It could curve and wobble and weave and have all kinds of angles there. So one of the important things is to recognize on this plan that the building envelope is different than the pad. And so there could well be this very complex interference with these lots when they end up being sold and somebody has to do one first or second or third. I'd be curious if a realtor feels comfortable selling the most difficult lot first so that gets built and then it doesn't impact somebody else, or whatever order you think you're going to do this. And what happens if all 4 houses want to get built at the same time? And how does our city kind of deal with this? So those of us who've been in this loop for the last couple of years, I have been trying to understand how anybody feels comfortable trying to put 4 houses on this property. It's extremely complex. We've all read all of the documents that have been put out there. We've read, I read the EAW, I've read all of the supporting documents, I've read the staff report, and it just seems like this is getting murkier and murkier and murkier as it goes along, and more complex, and more of a responsibility on our city staff and city people, all of you who have to make decisions about this every single time something comes up here. The Capon girls should be able to develop their property, absolutely, but this is just seems unbelievable. I thought I'd give you an idea about this road. So this road is 625 feet long, or 26. That goes to the middle of the cul-de-sac, as measured and told by Brad when we had a meeting this last couple weeks ago. So there's another 25 or something feet further down at the end of it. And I thought maybe you'd be curious about how big that road is. So if you started at the east end of Cove in Wayzata and walked westward, that road, you have to take it all the way down to Ben and Jerry's intersection. It goes in front of all of Cove, all of the park, all of the shops, all the way down to where Ben and Jerry's starts. It's also 26 feet wide, and it covers 44,800 square feet. An acre is 43,550 square feet. So it's larger than an acre, the hardcover that we're putting in there. When the question came up about this amount of fill, et cetera, and the number of truckloads and all of that that's coming through, way back when the EAW was put together, the developers put data in there about how much fill and cut and all of that was going to happen. Fill, cut, grading, et cetera. I recognize that that might have changed as you've been working on your plans, but I was able to kind of do some calculations and think about 10-ton truckloads. There could be anywhere from 487 to 784 10-ton truckloads that will be involved in just getting this place ready. In and out, up and down, cutting down, adding to make this road less than 8%, fixing the hole wherever the landscape needs it, removing trees, all of whatever the material is. I thought also that it would be interesting to see that when you guys are proposing the tree replacements for the ones that are getting removed, and I'm sorry, you know, some of us like woods that are kind of dark and interesting rather than big sunny open places. And because I'm a teacher, I brought a couple props, and I will just show you that this is 7 feet. This is a 4-inch tree, and this is a 2-inch tree. And I want to just say that when all of you are happily saying that you're going to put in 5 7-foot arborvitae that are 2.5 inches, and 5 3-inch elms, and 4 2.5-inch maples, and 3 3-inch oaks, and 4 4-inch hackberries, and 5 7-foot hemlocks at 2.5 inches. And then you're going to pay a fee for all that's going to equate to all the rest of what you're removing. We spent all this time and energy and effort putting together a tree ordinance, and we're going to let that be what mitigates all of that removal. Somewhere there is something that doesn't feel good about that as a citizen of this
Thank you.
community.
It's actually 3 minutes that we
Sorry.
have. Yeah, thank you very much. Appreciate your time. Yes, please.
I'm Phil Sorn, 532 Ferndale Road West. I'm the property right across the street from the proposed development. Sue covered a lot of some of my concerns. I'm not an expert on riparian lot law, but I'll try to stay above board here if I can. But I think my number one objection is doing a subdivision here. You know, why do we have a road that has gutters and, you know, more width than most of the roads in the community and for 4 houses? And at the end, that road just goes right into our driveway. So I have concern about safety for, you know, our family and also our property values also. So number one is the subdivision concept, and then the whole thing with the road and all the stuff that goes on there. I mean, if you look at Highcroft, Harrington, Bovey, those roads don't have gutters. I mean, there's all sorts of reasons. I think we can do some modifications here to make it more amenable. Sue brought up, it's a 750-foot road with the thing there. The drive in our garage, the trees. I did a quick estimate, just the first 15 feet will probably be 25 trees. I'm wondering if 85 is really the right number for just the road. And then once you do the 4 lots, pads or whatever, it's going to be a lot of trees there that we're trying to, and we're not going to replace, you know, fee in lieu is not going to cover it, is kind of my bottom line there. Let's see, we've covered the whole thing about the thing. I just end here with, this is a really complex project. And I think this is a time where we need some leadership from the Planning Commission and the City Council. You know, they should be able to monetize their lots. I mean, there's no doubt about that. But maybe I can just see everybody trying to fit into the code. You know, they have those little lines going all over to try to get the, you know, lake shore they need and stuff like that, and trying to get the setbacks just right. I think if you sat down and really worked on it and gave them some variances in other places, we might be able to minimize the impact here. So I encourage you to take your leadership and let's work together to try to have a less impactful subdivision across the street from our house. Thanks.
Thank you. Yes, please.
My name is Don Birdsong, and we are connected to the applicant. We have 650 feet of abutted property line that run to the very west of their property line. We live at 621 Ferndale Road West. Penny and I moved to 621 Ferndale Road West in 2005. We purchased the lot in 2003. We completed the construction and moved in. In our construction, we kept the same driveway, the same retaining walls, didn't remove a tree, tore down an uninhabitable conditional use house, which we're zoned for, and built our premise. And we built a circular drive to make sure that service vehicles and emergency vehicles could come up and circle around. Since we only have 2 minutes, I brought a couple exhibits. I'm not going to take the time and waste my 2 minutes handing them.
I'm sorry, I misspoke. It's 3 minutes.
3 minutes? Okay, I still wouldn't.
At every meeting.
Okay. So we moved in that year. As we said, we installed the circular drive. In 2006, we completed our conditional use property, which was used by Penny's parents for caregiving for her parents. Her mom is now 98 in Wisconsin. The property was constructed in the same location, as I said, as the existing house. We own 450 feet of front on Ferndale Road, which requires only 200 feet. We have 5 acres of land. I found out today I'm going to be giving a drive off the road to come to my property, which I would like to address a little later. And so, as I said, we were going to provide an exhibit, and it's just an aerial view to show that currently there's an existing house on 565 with a conditional use house, and ours next door is a house with a conditional use house. That's the current layout. If you take a look at what's being proposed, first I asked the question, why? Why is the road coming within 10 feet of our property line? And in fact, if you look at the exhibit here, where the yellow stops and the red stops, it's an indiscernible line. I honestly can't tell you where it is. It's so close together. And there's about a 5-foot old rock retaining wall with 2 old trees that actually keep that separation retained. And there's about an 8-foot drop from the level of that driveway down to our driveway. So I'd like to highlight, using this plan, a couple of things that are impacting. As I said, we have 650 feet of shared property line. The road will be constructed between 10 and 60 feet, 50 feet being the easement, 10 being the closest point that, Brad, I think you told me it was 10 on one and 12 on the other. So this is going to remove 88 trees for just the road. It's going to take 3,900 yards of cut. It's going to require 2,500 yards of fill on the back end to get to the cul-de-sac. So there's a significant amount of activity going for the road. Up to this point, the applicants told you about the lot placement, the setbacks, and the reason why, I don't believe the applicant wanted to put the road within 10 feet of our property line. They have to. Mr. Zwieber put up a slide earlier on that showed you that there are 3 key bluff setback points. And those bluff setback points really constrict the ability to place these pads. One of them is right up against the bluff setback point, and the other one, I believe, is up against it to, I think it's the south. That's lots 2 and 3. Those setback points make everything have to move our direction, not to the east. In fact, I believe at the widest point, this developable area is no wider than 200 feet from our property line and runs all 650 feet along our property line. So that is kind of our analysis of what is going to take place. In the applicant's request for a variance on 725-foot cul-de-sac versus 600 and how they were going to preserve the topography, we take real exception with that. And we would invite you to come out, because if you come from our property line, there is a massive, what I'll call, hole that runs between the current drive and the guest house. And that hole probably is 15 feet deep. The cul-de-sac at 725 requires 2,500 cubic yards of fill. And if you take a look, there's an exhibit in their presentation that actually fills that hole and we're in the wetland area, so it pushes water toward our property, and actually a corner of our guest house is in that zone. And again, it's in the documents that you can take a look at. The applicant also cited subdivision standards, City Code 1003.02, and I believe it's paragraph 3, and I apologize if I've got this wrong, but the building pads that result from a subdivision or lot combination shall be selected and located with respect to natural topography and to minimize filling and grading. They believe they complied. We, as the western neighbor, do not believe they comply. We believe that those pads do not comply to minimize the filling and grading. City Code 100302, I believe it's paragraph 4, says the existing stands of trees shall be retained where possible. Building pads that result from the subdivision and lot combination shall be sensitively integrated into the trees. Again, we just don't agree. If you go back to the environmental impact assessment, that assessment stated that 2.1 acres of trees will be removed. Again, if you take 200 feet wide of developable area, 950 feet long, you're at 4.3 acres. So almost 50% of the developable area will lose its tree cover. And quite frankly, our canopy to the west will be exposed to damage because we've been through multiple storms in the last 20 years. And typically it's not the full tree that goes down, it's the canopy that breaks when there's a bad storm. You take away the 88 trees, now our eastern border canopy is exposed to damage. In paragraph City Code 1003.02, the creations of lots shall not adversely impact the scale, pattern, or character of the city or its neighborhoods.
Thank you. I'm sorry. Do you want, please complete your thought. Sorry, I thought you were complete. Please complete your thought.
Okay. So we believe the proposed plan adversely impacts the scale pattern of the neighborhood. You know, since the development plan does not comply with the code, we believe the proposed development should be denied. However, we believe the city and the applicant should work together to come up with a plan that doesn't so severely impact the street. Is there a way to utilize an existing private drive and get a similar number of houses in that aren't required to be the R1A requirement? It's that simple. Secondly,
I'm sorry, I'm going to have to stop you there. Yeah, thank you.
Can I just say, going over, we think it's unfair for a resident that has such a significant impact as being proposed here, not giving sufficient time as the applicant.
Thank you. Any other members of the public who would like to speak this evening? Yes, please. Would you please state your name, address, and any association with the project, if you have any?
My name is Tom Hall. I'm here with my wife, Catherine. Our residence is 459 Ferndale Woods. We are the neighbors to the west of this property, the immediate west. And frankly, we've enjoyed having the Capins as neighbors. You've been great people. I'm sorry you're leaving the area here. Our concern is that you're creating 4 lots where in the past there has been just 1 lot. And the consequences will be increased street traffic, increased pond traffic. There'll be additional residential noise, and there will be some environmental impact on wildlife as well. Of primary concern is the footage or the 4 access points on PV Pond. PV Pond at one time, in fact for several decades, was a spawning area which limited boat access. It really is a pond by character. And we'd like to preserve that character in the pond. I think that's it.
Thank you very much. Are there any other members of the audience who would like to speak this evening? Please.
Good evening, thank you. My name is Steve Hemsley. I'm at 622 Ferndale. And I would align with others in the community, and I think more than 20 others in the immediate community that are opposed this level of development, the aggressiveness of it, the notion of actually advancing a subdivision into that community. And it's been interesting to observe the technical discussion tonight, but if you've actually been to that property and can see its positioning, its topography and so forth, you dismiss out of hand the notion of developing at this level, or the notion that putting a subdivision in of that scale, a road of that formality, and developing it in this manner would not disturb the character or the aesthetics of the community or the environment that it has been accustomed to, or the watershed areas. I think that if you are responsible for protecting the community with respect to responsible development, then I think that this conversation tonight, the presentations that were made, would suggest that this level of development is too aggressive, and that we would also welcome a more responsible approach to the property. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other members of the public? Yes, please.
Yeah, my name's Jeff Martha. My wife and Stephanie and I live at 520 Ferndale Road. So basically, it fills right across the street. We're a couple feet away. Not connected with the developer. Never met her before, or her family.
Thank you.
So we were one of the ones that didn't have an opportunity to talk to her. But we're one of the newer ones in the neighborhood. So it's so great to hear all the people that have been here for so long and had a passion around the neighborhood. We've been here almost exactly 3 years. One of the reasons we did buy here, though, from another part of town was just the serene nature of it, right? We do get a lot of walkers, runners, bikers, but you don't get a lot of traffic. And for the next foreseeable couple of years, that's going to dramatically change. You heard Sue's comments about 700 truckloads. That's just getting the property ready. And so I don't want to repeat what everybody else said, but the scale, the subdevelopment seems really aggressive. It's just, I'm concerned about property value. And I'm also concerned about just the disruption that it's going to cause for I don't know how many years. And I'm just, it is interesting, as Steve was saying, the coming here and listening to the technical details and how we are trying to kind of abide by these technical details. But when you take a step back, I don't understand how the math all works. Honestly, I've looked at it and I just don't get how this math works and how you can do this. But I'll end there and appreciate your leadership in this matter. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any other members of the community here tonight that would like to speak? Director Gellner, do we have anybody on Zoom?
Chair, we do not.
Okay, well, thank you, everybody. Unless I missed anybody, then I will go ahead and close the public meeting and bring the discussion back to the commission. Do we have any follow-up questions for staff at this point, commissioners?
I have one about the road. It does seem awfully close there. But on the other hand, if you were to stick with where the original road is and just have that be a driveway, is it even possible to have 3 or 4 cuts off of one driveway leading to other driveways? In other words, does this have to be a city road in order to have those lots there?
Good question, Commissioner. The short answer is yes. I think I'll just turn to Planner Zoeber to just give a little more detail on when a public road is required of this width and this size.
Thank you. A public road is required in any subdivision that is not a planned unit development. And so we did discuss that with the applicant, that could be a different option. But the the city code, any subdivision, any new number of lots require a public road that is curb and gutter, 26 feet wide, right of way, 50 feet wide. There's additional standards for the cul-de-sac. But, looking at the straight zoning of R1A, if they are to subdivide even into 2 lots, they would require a public road. One last thing I would mention, there is a minor subdivision, a lot split provision in our code that would allow for 2 lots. But one of the conditions of that would be that both lots that are created are within 125% of the minimum lot size. So basically, that would limit you'd have to start with about 200 square feet and then cut it in half. So this lot is too large to be under that minor subdivision or lot split process. So to even get 2 lots on a lot this size requires a subdivision. Unless they requested for a planned unit development, the code requires that they have a public road.
So has a PUD been discussed with this client before?
We have identified that section of the code to the client.
And just to give a little more context to the planned unit development option, that is just a really completely different process with different criteria. One thing discussed with the applicant, though, is that just looking at a zoning map, there are no other PUDs in this area. PUDs are typically not used for 4-lot subdivisions. Our subdivision ordinance is the most appropriate mechanism for managing thoughtful development within our community and residential neighborhoods. So I would propose that we continue to, work with the applicant on a subdivision application as being the most appropriate way to develop in this area. I understand there are a lot of private driveways from the past, but that is not what our subdivision ordinance requires at this time.
Okay, thank you.
And with that, the public road that is required in this situation, and what we're looking at here, there's no restriction as to how close it can be to another property line?
The edge of the right-of-way can be at the property line. The road itself cannot. You need that, what we call a boulevard between the right-of-way and the curb itself. But the right-of-way could be right on the property line.
So just to clarify on the image you're seeing here, that gray area includes the right-of-way. And then it's hard to see, but there's black lines down the middle that show where the delineation of the roadway is.
So this is conforming in all those ways?
It is.
And with regards to safety, in terms of, it can take a fire truck if need be to go that distance. There's water drainage inherent in the road structure with sewers to take care of runoff. What am I missing in the area of safety with that?
Madam Chair, you're not missing anything.
Okay, awesome. Okay, thank you for that clarification on the public road. Do you have a question?
One question for staff. There was mention of a 2-lot split, but there would be some governing or some variances required. What is required for that if it is not currently under the R1A?
So to reiterate, a lot split can occur when both lots are within 125% of the minimum lot size. So that, in this case, 80,000 square foot is the minimum lot size. Each lot cannot be larger than 100,000 square feet. And we have 3 lots here that are 80,000, and then we got the other one that's 214. So we wouldn't meet that standard. That is a code provision of that lot split section of the code.
I'll add one quick clarification. What Eric is describing is the difference between a minor and a major subdivision. Minor subdivisions are administrative and go through staff. Major subdivisions are the ones that come to the council. In terms of whether a two-lot subdivision would be compliant here, we'd have to go compliant with subdivision standards and not require any variances. We would need to go through that analysis. But at first glance, the frontage on Ferndale Road today is just over 200 feet. So at minimum, we would need to start talking about a lot width variance to even fit two lots that both have frontage on Ferndale Road.
Thank you. Do we have further questions of staff at this point? I have a question. The lot shapes themselves are unique. Can you give some information, can you refer us back to that slide where you talk about the, that?
Oh,
We can't hear you.
Community Development Director Gelner is pulling that up, but this is the city code definition of or requirements for a side lot line. And that is that the lot line be at right angles to the street line and that they are radial to the lake shore. So as we're showing there in the slide, the lot line proposed between lots 1 and 2 has 5 different segments. So there's a beginning and end point of those lines and that bearing. The section or segment farthest to the west on all 3 of those lot lines, they are at right angle to the street. The farthest east lot line is radial to the lake shore, but then you have 3 additional segments for between lot 1 and 2. You have 4 additional segments between lot 2 and 3. You have 1 additional between lot 3 and 4. You know, take, for example, the lot line between lots 2 and 3. If we're looking at what is radial to the street, or to the shoreline, that is radial to the shoreline, basically meaning, perpendicular for a distance of 3 feet into the lot. So it gets into the wetland 3 feet, and then it turns almost 90 degrees and heads north. So is there a segment of the lot line that meets that standard? Yes. How should we apply all these other segments that don't meet either of those standards?
And the purpose of those shapes is to increase the access for each lot to PV pond. Similar as though you would do the same thing for a cul-de-sac, where you would have sort of that shape to maybe squeeze an extra lot or plot into a cul-de-sac in the opposite way.
I guess I just defer to the applicant's testimony. That's my understanding from their testimony.
Okay. Any other questions of staff at this point or further clarification on anything we've discussed? Okay. If not, then we can bring the discussion back to commission and share our thoughts or discussion amongst each other. Would someone like to begin?
Please, Ken.
Yeah, if you like, Chair, I'll make a few comments. So, well, tonight's kind of city process in action. We have active, involved neighbors, which is a positive sign. We have a very impressive application with considerable information. We have a unique property in a lot of respects, a unique application. So I would, I applaud the applicant and all the effort they went through and acknowledge that you've reached out and talked to some of the neighbors. It's not very often we get 234 pages in the application pertaining to your perspective on things ranging as far as bald eagle habitat. So, so you've done a really nice job and made, I think, compelling discussion and positions in your own right on many of those very technical issues. And in many ways that you pointed out, I think another criteria that are in front of us as we look at this, and this is a quasi-judicial issue here, you know, many of the things that you've pointed out comply with subdivision ordinance requirements. You know, lot size, impervious surface, street design, trees, environmental utilities, you went through the EAW. So there's a whole lot of things that I think you could say support developing this lot or this property the way that you've approached them. But I think it is important to step back from some of the granular issues that were brought up in the application, especially as were pointed out by your consultants. And we need to strongly consider these things like, you know, lot size requirement is 80,000 square feet, which technically meets the criteria. It's interesting, though, that the land available under 3 of the lots is actually 6,000 to 8,000 square feet or less. We've kind of dealt with this issue in other properties in the city also. So it's more of a practical issue. The lot configuration, which has got a lot of discussion this evening on the site lot lines. And I guess we don't have, the slide we have up here frequently, and it's been talked about pretty extensively, shows significant variance to what is really desirable and required by some of the subdivision ordinances. We didn't talk about the parking area grade, but I think there were some issues there that were a concern that we need to think about. There were many issues on protected areas, constructing on steep slopes, bluffs, the 18% grade issue that I think, especially on lot 4, which I think are a concern. And then the performance standards and this whole issue of the setbacks and the variance that may be required in terms of the complicated issue that was described by the consultant. So, I mean, the punchline of that seemed to be it may work and it may result in a situation that would require variance in a future date by a future planning commission. We just don't know. So I think that's something for us to consider, that, you know, as our actions tonight putting, you know, going to result in a future planning commission having to make a hard decision or kind of forced into a decision at a future date. So, I mean, clearly there's a desire to get 4 lots, all access to PV Pond. It's going to require these irregular shaped lots. I think, you know, it does appear like you're going to do something unique to access the docks that would be, if they're desirable for all 4 residences. But really, you know, thinking about all that, you know, as we've been, as is typical, I mean, we need to think about it in terms of the criteria that we've been given. And some of it was summarized pretty well by staff, but just to go through a couple of them quickly, this is on the plat approval. Pads result from a subdivision or lot containment shall preserve sensitive areas such as lakes, streams, wetlands, wildlife, etc. Creation of a lot or lots shall not adversely impact the scale, pattern, or character of the city or its neighbors. The lot, building pad, and site layout shall respond to and be reflective of the surrounding lots and the character of the neighborhood. And the layout and pad shall conform with all performance standards. And some of those, I think, that we just talked about, you could say may not conform here. And there are several more, but they're of the same context. I think for, for me, it looked like we're trying really hard to get 4 lots here, all with water access. And maybe we're trying a little too hard. So I would hope that, depending on what happens this evening, that the applicant would kind of hear what was said this evening and other comments that we have by the commission, and we'll be taking a vote soon. So,
Thank you, Commissioner Sorensen. Does another commissioner have anything to add or further elaborate on? Commissioner Planton?
I insist.
Yeah, looking at, there was a lengthy submission. I can't believe we had 200-some pages. And it took a long time to go through, and was very intrigued with all the care that went into the location of the pads, the grading, the situation of the lot. Sometimes when there are so many, I don't want to say challenges, just because you can always meet some of them doesn't mean you should, and something about this isn't feeling just quite right. If you look at what our questions to consider are, I do feel like there is an impact to the neighbors from this application and development. And I wish there was some way that we could work on 2 lots or 3 lots. I'm a little dismayed with 4. I don't see a subdivision in this neighborhood at this time. I'd like to talk a little bit further about that.
Yes, please. Oh,
collectively.
Yeah, for sure. But Commissioner
if it
Schwalbe,
weren't-
did you have something that you wanted to say?
Well, it does feel like it's taking a lot of massaging to get 4 lots out of here. I'm particularly still worried about that road and how close it's coming to the neighbor to the west. And lot 1, it's just such a gyration to get it down to the water in such an odd shape. It seems to me that there's a little more work that needs to be done. I don't know if that means it can still be 4, maybe it has to be 3. But I think that a little more consideration for the neighbors and their reasoning for objecting to this as it sits right now needs to be done by the developer. And then we go again at a different time. That's what I think. I don't see that this is ready to go, in my opinion.
One thing we haven't talked about is also the driveways and how steep they are, which is not in compliance, right? 2 or 3 of them, wasn't it?
That's correct. In their demonstration of a few of the driveways, they weren't able to show a slope that was, built on a slope that was less than 18%. I can pull up the
Yeah,
slide for that.
thank you, Community Development Director Geltner. If I could take it from a little bit there, there's really 2 standards we're looking at, and possibly 3. The driveway itself, by city code, can't be more than 10% in grade. So all 4 driveways, as they've illustrated, are 10% or less in grade. There is another standard about parking areas, but that might be able to be met in a garage, that it has to be less than that. What we're pointing out here for the driveways in green is that as a part of the subdivision, the preliminary plat needs to demonstrate that that construction is not required in an area of 18% or higher slope. All 3 of these driveways, there is a slope 18% or higher or greater between the proposed public road and what would be the building pad. So all 3 of the driveways shown in green would result in construction over 18%.
So technically, we're looking at in this proposal, a couple things sort of came to the top, and I agree with, I just want to state that I agree with the comments that have been made, especially the level of detail here, and it's very appreciated, and expertise. But what seems to be filtering to the top for me at this time is a couple technicalities, and one of them is that we have 3 driveways and a building pad with a slope of over 18%. And we have 3 potential orders of events with regards to building the homes that could work for variant setbacks, but an unknown number of, I mean, I guess there's you do the math and how many other potential orders of building would potentially impact future variances for those lots. Is that right? Okay. So there's a bit of ambiguity there that we are looking at with regards to this.
And
Right?
Right, and I think that addresses, are we looking at, are these 4 lots reasonable and acceptable?
Yeah, and that's exactly right. When we go back to our, as Commissioner Planton's pointed out, when we go back to our, the criteria that we are looking at specifically, and that's why I'm asking for clarification there. It's, are these performance standards reasonable?
Agree.
Yeah. And then also the shape of the lots. And so this one kind of confuses me, and because I appreciate the access to the lake. It's obviously a wonderful resource, but the efforts to get there seem excessive. Period. Overly complex, especially given all the unique slopes and of the site. I don't know, does anyone else have a thought on that?
I agree with you completely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree also. I think, one of the criteria for land suitability is that the, lots shall be suitable in its natural state for the proposed use with minimum alteration. So I think it's just, one of several criteria that it kind of are directly related to some of the challenges that we have here.
Right, and the impacts.
And the impact.
Collective impact, I guess. So we're really looking at, right now we're looking at the preliminary plat approval and sort of focusing on several of the criteria that we need to meet. And it's, I think amongst the discussion so far, we're really looking at numbers 5, 6, and I think, Ken, you read both of those, right? And the performance standards, especially with number 10, with regards to slope and the 18% for Plat 4. There it is. So, any further thoughts or anything to add on those items? Or anything within there? Director Gill, oh yeah, Commissioner.
Yeah, just, I think it'd be appropriate to just recognize the uniqueness of this property. It's a wonderful piece of property that has great development potential. I think what you're hearing tonight, though, are just, there's some challenges with trying to do 4 lots with access to PV Pond that could be maybe not eliminated, but could be addressed significantly with a less aggressive proposal.
Director Gellner, does it make sense to move on to the variance?
I think so. I just wanted to clarify if you had any additional thoughts on the radial lot lines, if that was part of your comments on performance standards specifically, or if they're...
I do. I think there's an understanding that you sort of we're aiming for a radial lot line kind of approach, and that's been outlined here a couple times. And it's taken me, the reason why I'm hung up on it is because I see this flag shape, and I'm thinking about cul-de-sacs and how we have something called a flag lot, which is not what we have here technically, but the purpose of that is to avoid sort of creating too much density around around a cul-de-sac. And here we're using the same shape, although it's not called out as specifically as a flag, but that shape in reverse to do the same thing, potentially overcrowding PV pond in and of itself. So I'm not quite comfortable with even though it's a different use, the logic is the same, and I'm not quite comfortable with that impact. So that's what I'd like to add about that, and that's why I was asking so many questions in that area. So with no more, Commissioner Sorensen?
Yeah, maybe just comment about that. I think if you look at, I assume this is up here, you know, the desire to have 90-degree corners at the street and then a radial type of geometry coming from the water. I mean, there's a reasonable point there of, doesn't have to be exact, I presume, but if you look at this, this is quite significantly different. I think that's more the issue.
Thank you for clarifying that piece. I think it does make sense, Chair, to move to the cul-de-sac length variance request, which is different criteria, so I'm just scrolling to that here. It's up on the screen.
Okay, so here's the criteria before us. We didn't focus too much on questions around that, except the ones I had after the fact. Does anyone else have any thoughts on the variance here?
By agreeing to the variance, does that mean that we agree to where they have the road situated right now? Or is it just that they have approval to do a 726-foot cul-de-sac, driveway and cul-de-sac?
I would say that the best way to think about this request is that it is associated with the preliminary plat, ultimately. So approval of only this wouldn't really relate to any actual building of a street. They would need a preliminary plat to actually divide these lots. So we need to make findings because it is a specific request, but I don't see a practical scenario where this moves forward in any kind of way without that preliminary plat.
Well, it seems perhaps we're premature in approving something like this. Am I correct?
Chair and Commissioner, I'd just say, you know, your job is not to approve anything tonight. You're making a recommendation to council.
Oh, right.
So I think one of the reasons it's going to be important to discuss this and to have it included in your report is, you know, council could go a different way on the first one, and it might be very important for them to understand your thinking on this. You're charged with making findings and a recommendation regardless. But so I think it's worth a discussion. But I think Director Gellner is correct. Approval of this variance without approval of the preliminary plat is kind of moot and useless because it is tied to a specific proposal.
Okay, well, I think we should then further the discussion. I mean, we've already discussed whether or not we're comfortable with the proximity to the neighboring adjacent property. It does meet the requirements in terms of safety. The variance is on the length, and that also provides access to the first property, but it does also mitigate some tree loss, was what I was seeing. Was anyone else seeing any of that nature? We also identified that there was no sort of known reason why, other than block length averages, potentially, why a cul-de-sac could only be a specific length.
Well, I'm looking at the variance criteria. I don't think in extending it's going to correct any of the inequities. I feel very close to the adjacent property. That it's not going to help correct the 18% grade to the existing lots. If there was a way that it was helping with that or doing something, might be some consideration, but I don't see it helping with any of the hardship related to the difficulties.
Thank you, Commissioner Planton. Commissioner Sorensen, do you have any further comments?
No.
Okay. Well then, I guess we've stated our thoughts on that, but it feels premature to sort of, given the fact that there could be so many more changes to, I guess we could make a recommendation that it complies with everything, that I don't see it not complying in and of itself with any of the criteria.
I think I could maybe help clarify a little bit with this one. It's a little unique, where I'm going to point you to the first paragraph there, that last sentence is, a variance shall only be approved when the
right.
city council finds the following statements. So it's a little different. It's not quite like the variances we often look at for fences and setbacks, where you're proving a practical difficulty. This is a higher standard to meet, so please keep that in mind.
Thank you.
Chair, I think that's an excellent point. Just to sort of further clarify, I mean, you need to be able to find that each one of these things are true in order
Got it.
to recommend approval of the variance. So even if one of them isn't resonating with you or you would have concern with it, that would be highlighted in your report.
Go ahead. Did you have something to say?
Well, just, I think we've talked about it pretty thoroughly. I think
Yeah.
in the end, we're going to either, deny or approve the application the way it comes, so.
Okay. Well, I think we've discussed this at length. Do we have a motion from any of the commissioners?
Make a motion.
Concerning the, you go ahead.
No, if you prefer, go ahead.
I don't even know what I would make the motion on. Are we talking about the variance now or on the whole thing? What are we, just the variance?
For both.
We're talking about the application.
Yep, the application as a whole.
And I have it on the screen there, if that is helpful. And you just fill in the approval or denial, please.
And Chair, I might just interject here, just a process comment that I know will make afterwards, but I think it might be useful for all the folks that are here tonight. I mean, the Planning Commission is an advisory body for council, and procedurally what will happen is they will direct staff to prepare a draft planning report and recommendation where staff will capture the comments made in the meeting this evening, articulate the findings that are based on the criteria. And that will come back at the next meeting. It will be on your consent agenda for approval at that point, and then it goes on to council. So just a little primer on the way the procedure works here. So yes, staff is asking for this motion.
And Commissioner Sorensen.
Okay. So I recommend that the Planning Commission report and recommendation recommending denial of this application for review and adoption at the next Planning Commission meeting.
Noted?
Yes, Chair. Yes, and I assume, Commissioner, the motion was to direct us to prepare that draft report based upon your discussion this evening. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Schwalbe. Can I get a second on that?
Second.
Thank you, Commissioner Sorensen. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Those opposed, please say nay. The ayes have it, the motion passes, and the draft report and recommendation will be on the consent agenda at the next meeting. And we'll go into adoption, and after adoption, we'll go into City Council for their consideration. Thank you, everybody. Thanks, everybody that's here, applicants, staff, members of the public for participation in tonight's meeting. Thank you. Okay. Next, we can go on to other items. Director Geller, do you have review of development activities and planning commission meeting schedule?
Yes, you've seen the progress of Wells Fargo. I think the bank will have its first day open hopefully in July, the small bank building that's underway. And the office is still, of course, under construction, doing interior work now. The applicant is anticipating that with all permitting occurring in the anticipated timeline, that they may demo that existing building come this fall.
Okay.
I can wait until the room is clear. We have updates on our project webpage for Wells Fargo. It has a very detailed construction timeline if you're interested in seeing that. And we'll provide updates as the applicant has them. We will have a meeting on June 3rd. We have one public hearing that evening. It's for a home on Rice Street, not far from here, that is requesting variances for landscaping improvements. So maybe fairly short meeting that night, just so you're aware, June 3rd. And then I'm anticipating the cancellation of our June 17th meeting, because I think we won't be prepared to have enough people in attendance for that evening. So let me know if you have any attendance, anticipate missing any meetings this summer, so I can try to plan around that as best as possible. And I think that's really it for me, Chair.
Thank you, Director Gellner. Okay, well, thank you, everyone, for participating. That concludes everything on our agenda. And can I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Second.
Thank you, Commissioner Swamy. Further discussion? All those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it, the motion passes, and the Monday, May 20th, 2024, Wayzata Planning Commission meeting is adjourned.